Okay, moving on to the next genre. Let's look at the period piece. It's a pretty casual term, but I really just mean nonfiction or biography, set in a certain time and a certain place, and usually following some kind of historical figure of note in our culture. 2015's Vincent by Barbara Stock is set in southern France during the late 1800s, and clearly it follows the story of Vincent van Gogh. With a pleasant simplicity in its inking style, it shares the struggle of a far from famous Vincent who continues to explore the possibilities of color and light through his painting while suffering nervous breakdowns and seizures, and a world of people that don't understand his mission to turn the mundane into something vibrant. The illustrative aspect of the comic medium is perfectly suited for these types of stories, and the simplicity of Stokes' inking lets these stories show instead of tell. This inking style probably recalls some of the look of the Gag comic, which actually works really well for accessibility because the mood is instantly lightened just by the inking and character design. So young people can engage with this interesting story from a moment in history they would otherwise have no point of reference for. Up next, we're looking at graphic memoir. It's a very popular breakout genre these days. Memoir was once the domain of the experienced writer, but graphic memoir opens up that genre to a much more diverse range of storytellers. At its core, graphic memoir communicates personal narratives through stylistic tropes of comic art. There are graphic memoirs about adulthood, like 2018's RX by Rachel Lindsay. Miss Lindsay's art style is based on the thin, wiggly line art of newspaper comics. In fact, at the time of this recording, she does a weekly comic strip for her local alternative newspaper in Vermont, USA. This makes her characters accessible and empathetic right off the bat. But RX goes deeper than her usual weekly comic strips. It's very personal. Lindsay uses her cartoonish humor to share her struggles to maintain stability with bipolar disease, all while working a corporate job as a graphic artist for a pharmaceutical company. And there are graphic memoirs about being a kid. One of the most popular ones is 2010's Smile by Rainer Telgemeier. In Smile, Miss Telgemeier shares her experience with middle school trauma after she severely injures her two front teeth. The comic takes you on a journey through self-consciousness and embarrassment as little Raina goes from surgery to braces to headgear and even ends up with some fake teeth. The social dynamics dealt with in the book are very relatable to a middle school kid, and I see a lot of kids so excited to talk about this book and its themes. They feel connected with the author and her story. The accessibility in comics and their lightness and stylistic energy allows storytellers to get personal and real without becoming downers. They can instantly convey with one panel what it was like to be in their shoes. To me, graphic memoir is the most important genre happening in comics right now. It's connecting readers of all ages with stories of representation, struggle, and most importantly, hope. Dramatic fiction is probably the longest running genre that we've seen in comic publishing, which fits under just the umbrella term of graphic novel. And if you want to talk about graphic novel, you got to talk about Will Eisner, the grandfather of the graphic novel. In fact, he invented the phrase. It was his little strategy for escaping the public's association of sequential art, panels, speech bubbles, cartoonish illustration with newspaper gag comics. He was doing his own thing and wanted to be taken seriously. No offense to Ernie Bushmiller, but newspaper comic strips weren't really interested in pushing literary themes like Eisner was. He was a great storyteller and understood more than anyone of his time the real potential of comic art. He began making comics in the late 1930s, right in the midst of the Great Depression. His world building is not unlike that of Batman's Gotham City. But his characters are more relatable and less exaggerated. They struggle through their poor inner city dealings with issues of money, respect, employment, economics, justice, and religion. Mr. Eisner was not above superhero tropes. In fact, his breakout character was the Spirit, a masked crime fighter who operated in a world of noir-style crime, with aspects of mystery, horror, love, and comedy, other niche, pulpy genres. Because Eisner's work is so rooted in the harsh realities of that time period, his stories just don't really feel relevant today. Which is too bad, because there's a lot to learn from his mastery of the comic medium. Lucky for you and I, Mr. Eisner published a series of instructional books. His style of teaching comics and the things he talks about really resonate with me. I think these books are amazing, and after understanding comics, it's probably the most well-regarded text on comics and visual narrative. Pick it up if you get a chance, or grab it from your local library. Genres are useful as access points for new readers. It helps them know what kind of characters, environments, and stories they're likely to encounter when they pick up the book. Now, you might ask, is it possible for me to make a kid-friendly memoir that has elements of dark and grimy crime noir drama? Of course. As long as you're staying true to your characters, their beliefs and aspirations, their weaknesses and failures, if you can manage to focus on that stuff, you're going to find readers who connect with your work.